When embarking on the journey of immigration to the United States from Europe, the duration of the voyage can vary significantly based on the mode of transportation chosen.
Opting for a steam engine ship generally entails a week-long passage, while selecting a sailboat can extend the voyage to anywhere from 2 weeks to several months. These days, you can get to the United States in 10 hours by plane, but in the past, it took a lot of time.
Immigrants from Europe who crossed the Atlantic Ocean breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the Statue of Liberty, knowing that the voyage had been completed safely and they had arrived in the United States.
However, Asians who immigrated to the United States across the Pacific Ocean in the early 20th century were worried when they arrived at Angel Island, the final anchorage of their voyage. Asian immigrants didn't think that this was America or that the hardship was over, but were worried about whether they would be able to pass through or how long they would have to be confined on that island.
It was not the beginning of hope for Asian immigrants, but the beginning of another hardship.
Most of the white immigrants who arrived at Ellis Island near the Statue of Liberty on one side of the Atlantic Ocean left the immigration office within a week at most.
98% of immigrants who arrived on Ellis Island made it to the mainland without much trouble.
If there were any problems with their documents, the Immigration Service made an effort to resolve the problem.
However, Angel Island was said to be too difficult to pass.
In some cases, migrants stayed longer than a year. Immigration officers there were inquisitive.
Who invited them, what kind of relationship they had with the invitees, what they lived off of when they came to the U.S., and so on, were asked in detail.
When the invitee was identified as the spouse, inquiries pertaining to matters of marital relations or other subjects incongruous with the prevailing context are undeniably interwoven with the purpose and substance of sexual harassment.
If the Immigration Bureau of Ellis Island on the Atlantic side was an institution created to help European immigrants, Angel Island on the Pacific side was a device to somehow stop immigrants.
Angel Island is just around the corner from San Francisco. It is located right next to Alcatraz Island, which is said to have been the most difficult prison to escape from in the United States.
UC Berkeley, one of the world's most prestigious public universities, is also not far away. The area is a key point for maritime transportation.
The reason why the Immigration Bureau was set up in such a place was an effort to somehow prevent Chinese immigration. The relationship between Chinese immigrants and the United States was a bit peculiar. The US tried to block the Chinese somehow, and the Chinese somehow tried to break through the US entry. In fact, the history of US immigration law has been, to the Extreme, a history of trying to stop Chinese immigration.
In 1875, the Page Act was created. The name of the California Republican congressman who initiated the bill was Horace Page.
It was basically a law to prevent female Chinese immigrants from entering the United States. It is a law aimed solely at the purpose of prostitution. Seven years after the Page Act was created, a stronger law was created. The name of the law was the Chinese Exclusion Act.
It was a law that Chinese people could not enter the United States or acquire American citizenship except for special exceptions in the next 10 years.
The law was extended for 10 years and later became semi-permanent. The Chinese Exclusion Act lasted until the end of the World War II. It was an unprecedented federal law that blocked the issuance of citizenship to certain races. However, the law did not prevent Chinese immigration. If the US government sets a policy, the Chinese will create countermeasures to neutralize the policy. This is the unique survival method of the Chinese people developed over many years. Even in response to the US government's immigration policy, the effect has been achieved without regret.
The United States, which followed a free immigration policy since its founding, suddenly enacted the Page Act and the Chinese Exclusion Act because the number of Chinese had suddenly increased since the mid-1800s.
It is difficult to know who was the first Chinese person to come to the United States. However, it was during the gold rush of 1849 that Chinese people began to come to America in groups.
In January 1848, placer or alluvial gold was discovered in the American River near Sacramento, California.
The person who first discovered the placer gold and the owner of the land kept it a secret.
They kept it secret to keep the gold among themselves a little longer, but it became known by word of mouth, and finally an article was published in the newspaper.
This was the year after gold was discovered. People's interest and obsession with gold was great, and they flocked to California like clouds. People were all going crazy trying to find gold and make a fortune.
The exciting gold story will continue in the next part. Thank you for watching the video, The History of Asian Immigration, Part 1, provided by History and Current Events. Gina, Bella, and Tony have contributed so far as narrators. Thank you.